Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to everybody for the opportunity to speak today. As mentioned, my name is Timothy Boettcher, head of MaivenPoint for North America, which is the e-learning solution platform from AvePoint Inc. And joining me today from AvePoint is Viktor Lindblom, who is the global L&D senior director of AvePoint's L&D operations. So today we're going to be discussing the changing landscape of hybrid learning in the context of a real-world example of the challenges that we faced in AvePoint and how we rolled out global training across all of our different offices by showing you a demo of how we're using the hybrid technology and automation to streamline and ensure that we're getting effective training globally. But to set the scene on what that looks like, giving background on today's challenges and what the goal of what we're trying to achieve and how we're addressing them, I'd like to introduce Viktor to talk a little bit more about the background.
Thanks for that introduction, Tim, and great to be with you all here today. To set the scene a little bit and kind of talk about the context before we get into the demo itself, one of the things in the industry and in the L&D space generally that we sometimes battle with a little bit is that L&D and training is sometimes seen as kind of a remedial action or a little bit of a necessary evil, maybe a compliance-based tick box that we need our audiences to tick. And we feel like some of the reasoning behind that perception is that actually the business goal and the specific ROI that we are looking to address and generate with the learning solution isn't necessarily planned into the learning initiative from the start. So where we've seen really great success actually as an organization is in going back to what we're trying to address as an organization from an outcome perspective, and then really developing our learning solutions with a very practical learning model around, again, what we're trying to do from a business perspective. This might sound really simple and really straightforward, but what that does do is it requires you to think about your learning solution a little bit differently, which we'll get into on the next slide. What we're really saying, though, here is that instead of sort of knowledge retention, we're actually much more interested in skill development and in applying the skills that have been acquired throughout the learning process. So our model here at AvePoint is highly outcome-based with validation and alignment sort of from a business perspective built into the learning content itself. One of the other challenges, though, that I'm sure will resonate with many people here on the call today is that as a global organization, we have global training requirements that we do need to meet as an organization. But at the same time, many of our local offices have regional programming requirements, maybe compliance requirements, paperwork requirements, and so on, where, yes, we do need to kind of provide programming and messaging from a training perspective that's globally consistent, but making it globally consistent to maximize reach also actually means we need to still retain the kind of locally relevant training materials and provide a user experience and learning experience that's really relevant for each region wherever they are. And so some of the things that Tim will be talking about later on today, I think, address that very nicely. We feel like we've been able to identify a model and really hone in on a learning model and a way of hosting and deploying learning in a global organization where, again, from a global messaging standpoint, training completion standpoint, we can protect the global consistency, but still actually provide a framework that accounts for the local requirements within all of our markets. Unless you have anything else to add, Tim?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the challenges we see with our customers as well, Viktor. You hit the nail on the head there, where you want to provide that balance about, giving local teams and the local audiences the autonomy to be able to deliver a training in a way that's going to be relevant and hit the mark for them, but also having that global consistency as well. So I think that's very important. And you mentioned as well about the skills moving from just a knowledge goal to a skills goal, which we'll get more into on the same slide. But as mentioned there, there was a LinkedIn Learning report that came out this year that talked about how the skill sets for jobs have been changing. And particularly, we look at things like ChatGPT and other kinds of disruptive technologies coming into the workforce. The workers of today and employees of today need to be armed with the relevant skills they need to stay effective. And this is constantly changing. So that's part of the reason why I think this is critical.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, then, let's kind of take a little bit of a step back and look at the model itself and how we've kind of applied this learning model here at AvePoint before we get into the demo itself. On this slide, what we're really talking about is kind of from a content and a programming perspective, how are we approaching the sort of authoring and deployment work here at AvePoint? There's some fairly common misconceptions, I think, in the field generally. For instance, many organizations tend to think narrowly about training and L&D as sort of a knowledge increase tool, if you will, where, for instance, if you're a very sales-driven organization, you might have this misperception in your organization that actually our people need to know all the things about all the solutions in order to sell them. And what we're sort of saying from an AvePoint perspective is that it is probably true that they need to know some things about your solutions. They need to know the right things, obviously, but you can take that a little bit further, actually, and hone in on developing the right skills that they need to apply what they've learned in a very practical way so that they can position the solution properly and then sell it. So we're kind of taking it a little bit further by actually going beyond just knowledge retention and figuring out what the skill gaps and the skills are that we need to develop in order to meet a business metric.
That old
Organization.
It's that old joke in training, right? About you never get a subject matter expert to teach a course because you only want to teach what's important and what's applicable. But to a subject matter expert, everything's important, everything's applicable, right?
I think you could say the same thing about product people sometimes too, right? But we've probably all been there in some context. I think the other kind of important thing to maybe debunk here at the start is that sometimes organizations tend to think, well, information leads to application. So all I really need to do is I need to give these people all of the information and then they're going to go and apply it, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We feel like it's actually really important to, first of all, figure out again what the skills are, the skill gaps are that we're looking to address from a training perspective, and then address those, but actually be really specific about what the application is that you are asking people to work towards following your training engagement. So the training really should be much more targeted from an enablement perspective, focusing on a predetermined call to action, which will help us get traction with alignment again on the business metric. I kind of said this before, but knowledge retention equals success. I think a lot of companies and kind of people who are sort of a bit more legacy minded still think like that. You know, we'll put this training engagement together, then we'll measure success by attaching a quiz or an assessment. And if Tim on our call today can pass the quiz or assessment with an 80% score, then he's good and he can now go do what he needs to do. Again, that could be the case, but I feel like that's a somewhat dangerous assumption to make. What we're saying here is that actually maybe the business result should be the success metric that we are working towards. In other words, success based on the impact on the business metric, which we've hopefully calculated and worked towards at the start of this engagement. That's really how we should be measuring our success. So ultimately, success comes out of moving the business needle in the direction it needs to go in. For all of that to happen, and this is sort of the grand narrative and conclusion on the slide, if you will, what we're really talking about is, you know, effective learning initiatives should be clearly measurable. They should have a clear business, again, metric that we're working towards. They should be outcome based so that people can go do something after, you know, learning about something. They should be able to apply what they've learned immediately, and we should be much more targeted and intentional in the call to action we are driving people towards. If we can measure the result before our learning engagement, do the learning engagement, deploy the learning engagement, support the learning engagement, let it run for a little while with some coaching and support behind the scenes, and then again do a kind of another data cut after deploying the learning engagement, you should have a really good program and a good approach to, again, validate your success based on a business metric rather than just knowledge retention. On that, I've said a lot there. Tim, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to the mix here.
No, I think that's super insightful, and it's helpful to focus that. So, you know, in terms of designing that learning program, designing it towards the outcome is critical, and that's something we'll be able to show in our demo a little bit later. So thank you. Equally important as that, of course, is the actual learning experience itself as well. You know, when you think about the different constraints of deploying a learning program, like how much time is at your disposal to achieve your goals, and who's available, and not to mention that, you know, a lot of studies show that collaborative learning from your peers, interacting with your peers and having a collaborative learning experience actually leads to stickier outcomes and better results, right? So when time is at a premium, when you want to reduce as many blockers and as many barriers and friction as possible, the ultimate kind of learning experience is one that's seamlessly blended into your work environment, right? I think learning the flow of work is kind of a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but most people are working in collaborative tools like Microsoft Teams and working with their colleagues in other sorts of chats and collaborative programs. Having to stop that and go to another system and log in and try and ask people to go and access this content becomes very difficult. So, our vision at MaivenPoint of a sort of a utopia learning environment is one where the learning is brought to the learners, and it's done in a way that's collaboratively, that enables real-time chats and seamlessly blends both on-demand and structured and results-driven content, along with the interactive and the live presentations and training too. And by putting it in a collaborative space actually allows you to uncover from your peers, from your colleagues, uncover SMEs in the organization and other people who can help contribute and share and learn together collaboratively, which is, again, putting it into action, like you were saying. It's not just sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture or just clicking through online on a course. It is the interactive discussions, it is the on-demand content with the chats, and it is learning together with your peers. So this is what we see as a really good hybridized employee learning experience. And so cutting down on operational efficiencies, having repeatable content, having blended learning paths, and getting really the best of both worlds. So to that effect, this is what we're doing for our demo. So the goal is, of course, being able to deliver blended global manager training. So Victor, did you want to tell us a little bit more about what the initiative was for the manager training at AvePoint?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on recently here at AvePoint is this blended manager and leadership training program that Tim was talking about there. One of our challenges, frankly, was that we didn't really have a good mechanic and methodology for having this kind of always on type of learning at our disposal that had this kind of practical outcome-based model that we were talking about before. And we didn't really have a good way of scaling that out to all of our regions. So while there was lots of ad hoc support and local sessions happening and so on within each of our regions, we didn't kind of have a unified umbrella for leadership development here at AvePoint. And so one of the things that we've done, actually leveraging MaivenPoint, is we've created now this program to upskill all of our managers globally, leveraging not just the unified approach and the sort of outcome-based model that Tim was talking about there before, but actually we're leveraging MaivenPoint to kind of stitch together an experience from multiple different elements, including the ILT sessions, a playbook that we've built, there's LinkedIn Learning integration, and many other elements in addition to this social element that Tim was talking about there, to provide kind of a seamless, always-on learning experience to support a management code that we've launched internally here at AvePoint in the last 6 months or so. And I think one of the really interesting things about this experience is that, again, we're leveraging MaivenPoint to, again, host a unified experience that's actually blending elements from many different components all together in one unified and seamless learning shell, if you will. So that's worked really, really well for us. Maybe, Tim, you want to say a few words about that before we get into the demo itself?
Yeah. So talking of what went well, as you'll see in the next slides in the demo, I think you'll really see how effective it was to have that blended mix, just like you were saying, of both the on-demand structured content that's leading to a results-based outcome and is trackable and is measurable, but how that's blended together in the same spot, in the same way, along with the live instructor-led training where we had guest speakers on different topics. So enough talking, let's launch straight into it. So first of all, I just want to give you an overview of what the course looks like in Curricula. So Curricula is obviously our product that we use for delivering and leading these training sessions. It's essentially our learning management system, but it's a lot more than your classic LMS where it's a separate browser-based system. This is tightly integrated into Microsoft Teams, as we'll show you in a second. But what I want to show you first is the TakePoint Manager training, TakePoint being the name of our leadership training here in AvePoint. What you'll notice is we have a course manager, we have a course duration, and we've got a number of different classes. So in our tool, creating a course defines your lesson plan. So this is where you will outline all the different lessons, whether there's a meeting invitation attached in Teams, and what all the different ad hoc activities are that are stored in the lesson plan. each one of these class of learners will become its own dedicated team automatically in Microsoft Teams. So one of the great features is you don't have to be a Microsoft Teams expert. You don't even have to be a technology expert. The tool is built for instructors, for L&D educators to be able to create their lesson plans and learning paths. And when they publish them, it automatically creates different teams for different regions. And this gives you the opportunity to have different audiences, right? So your different classes of managers and people that you want to address. And like we mentioned, so each you have the opportunity, you could have just one class if you wished, or you could have multiple classes. But in our case, we really wanted that globally consistent but locally relevant. And by making it locally relevant, we wanted to have local owners, local language, and local delivery while keeping with the overall consistent global structure. Okay, so let me show you what that looked like in curriculum. So from curricula, what we're able to do, this is the interface here that an administrator will see. So we can see the different ongoing courses. We can click on course to go into our specific courses, look for our TakePoint course, and you can organize this using different programs and permissions, and you can have different permission levels as well so that different members in your team have different level of access depending on their role and what they're doing in the training. And then you can click on configure. Okay. Now, this is where you can see things like we've got our different classes set up. Obviously, this is the demo environment. We couldn't show the real, the number of AvePoint managers and the kinds of things going on there. So, what we're showing here is that we've set up our different classes with our different audiences, and then we're setting up our lesson plan. And the way that this worked is with the TakePoint program, we were releasing one lesson every month over a 6-month period. So you can see here we're up to lesson 3, from setting expectations to coaching to performance management. And what we were able to do is for each one of these lessons, we would have a different speaker from the AvePoint executive team come in and share their experiences and lead the session and facilitate those live discussions. And with this lesson planning tool, what you're able to do is assign different timing and different speakers and trainers to the different local classes. So this is a really easy way that you, as an instructor, as an L&D professional, is able to create large training programs and be able to scale them across different trainers, across different venues. From there as well, you're able to create your own learning paths. So this is where for every lesson you can assign either, and this comes back to what Victor was saying about the problem-based outcomes, right? So if we think about when we're designing our learning path and designing our lesson plan, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? And what are the different steps and activities and reference materials that are going to lead to that outcome? And the way this tool works, you can have one overarching problem-based learning path that cuts across different lessons, or you can see what we've done here, and we've got a different learning path for each lesson. So we've got learning path number 1 for session number 1 and learning path number 2 for session number 2. So this is a very sort of academic approach to the learning plan. So you can see we've got a structure, we've got a plan, we've got some goals that we're trying to get to. So let me show you what that looks like for a user. Great. So as a member of the course, when I'm assigned to a class, like I mentioned before, it will appear automatically in my Microsoft Teams. So you can see in my Teams panel here, for those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Teams, you know that every unique instance of a team is an opportunity for you to collaborate, for you to share, for you to chat. And you can see already, I've been assigned a team here, Manager 101, Manager Training for North America. Because I'm in North America, I've been assigned to the North America team. But my colleagues who are managers in EMEA and APAC, they would be in the EMEA team or the APAC team. Now, from an administrative point of view, in terms of the L&D perspective, I'm managing the one lesson plan and the one series of learning paths here. But from a learner point of view, I've got my own personalized local team to work in. And what you can see here is that we're able to use this to actually post announcements and conversations. So we have a member here saying, if you haven't already, please activate your LinkedIn Learning license, because there's going to be activities later on that will require you to look at tasks on LinkedIn Learning. But this is also where you can do new conversations and say, hello team, we have an activity coming up in the next lesson, please be ready. And you can @ tag for notifications, as well as allowing the team to subscribe to notifications as well. And this is the Microsoft Teams functionality out of the box. If there's a certain lesson or a certain channel that you're interested in being notified in real time, you as an instructor can actually set up these notifications so that as the colleagues and the staff are interacting within the team, within this collaborative space, you can get notified. Okay. And again, these different sessions, you can actually configure them so that they only appear at the time of the lesson. So we haven't set up lesson 4 yet, or session 4 for the next month's session. When we do that, what we'll be able to do as an L&D admin is come into configure lessons, create a new lesson, and then we can set the lesson name, set the topic, define the learning outcomes. And what we'll be able to do is when we publish that, we can choose the date and time for when this lesson is going to appear. So we can organize that in advance. And from the learner point of view, it won't appear in their view until that time is ready. So as a learner, I can go into session number 1, for example, when that lesson got released. And this is where we're able to launch the lesson with a meeting. So we can do things like, we can say schedule a meeting or meet now if we want to do an ad hoc meeting from Teams, knowing that the audience of this team is the class of learners that we want to address. So that makes it really super easy and convenient to both communicate with and schedule meetings and schedule in-person sessions with this class. And again, this is a hybrid tool. Teams is hybrid out of the box. So when we ran this, we did have some people in the office being presented to in real time and some people dialed in remotely, but everybody's getting the same chat experience, the same video experience, and most importantly, they're able to access the same learning activities. So again, this is all set up automatically. When you publish the course into Teams, it will automatically create the team, add the users, and add the learning activities tab, so that every lesson you can get all of the learning activities and learning objects available here. This is where we're able to view the learning outcomes and see additional information as a learner about what's expected of me in this session. And I'm able to access, I can see how long the task is, what part of a learning path it's in, and whether it's a graded item or not. And I can walk my way through the different objects available, from the Take Point playbook session to refreshers on corporate policy as a PDF. We can have video recaps or other kinds of video and reference material. And we support Office documents, SCORM files, and all sorts of other different learning objects that support the learner's journey. So for each one of these lessons, our instructional design team created an interactive playbook, so to speak, which will step them through the different activities required of them in the L&D. And this is what, again, back to what Victor was saying in terms of having a clear path of learning activities and having a clear measurable outcome to get to. By accessing it in this system, number one, we have a structured playbook that will take people through the different expectations of them in the leadership team, different materials available for them, and interactive exercises that they need to complete. And we can track this by looking in curricula. We're able to access, if I come back to the admin view, we're able to actually come back to the marking and reporting pages to be able to see who has completed the tasks and who hasn't. So we can see here whether people have actually submitted the tasks and whether there's a passing score required and whether the attendees have actually completed the work. So this is one of the things that we're able to do. Of course, it's a demo environment, so it's a little bit light on, but we do have that full reporting available. Also from here, one of the great features that we were mentioning before is the fact of how seamless this is. So as a learner, I am here in the team, chatting with my colleagues, interacting. I can do likes, I can do emojis, I can see what's going on, I can see if a meeting's been scheduled or a Teams meeting. But while I'm in here, I don't have to leave here to go to another system to access my learning material. I can access my learning material right from Teams, in the flow of work, in the flow of collaboration, without having to be disrupted about joining a meeting on a separate platform and taking a learning activity on a separate platform and then trying to chat and collaborate on a separate platform. Everything's all together directly into Teams, and it's so directly integrated that I can even chat right from Teams here as well. So I can hit this chat button up in Teams while I'm accessing my learning content directly from the application and even start a new conversation. Say, hi team, I'm taking the application exercise and I have a question about it. Does anyone have any experiences they can share? And this is the way that we're able to facilitate some of that peer-based learning and interaction in real time. As they work through these exercises, you'll see new sessions get released. And again, we had different guest speakers, so we've got different meeting recordings available, and we're sharing the meeting recordings for people to be able to review, and people can comment and say, I really liked the part at 10 minutes in about, and people can interact and people can share their experiences while accessing the learning activities right from the panel. Okay, and it's not just about consuming material. So for example, one of the sessions in here, one of the activities required to fill out a coaching plan. So you activate the task and you download your coaching plan, and one of the activities following on from that is to then submit your coaching plan for peer review. So when you submit this task, it will come up with a form asking you, please submit the coaching plan for one of your direct reports, and you load it in here. And again, this is something that the managers are able to then, or the L&D team, as well as your peers, are able to review and mark and share your experiences about it. Again, keeping it all together and keeping this part of the actual defined learning outcomes. So it's not just a file sitting in a file share or a file sitting in OneDrive. This is all actually part of the learning experience. And so that was a demonstration of how we used automation and modern collaborative technology with MaivenPoint's curricular solution to start with an outcomes-based structured learning path, and then scale that to multiple regions with teams and leverage the hybrid nature of teams to deliver seamless local training that's globally consistent.
All right.
Okay, and that brings us back to the wrap up.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Tim. So in conclusion, then, what are we really saying here? We're saying that L&D can be a really powerful tool to set people up for success and to leverage as a tool to move your business metrics forward. But for that to really work well for your organization and for you to maximize the impact of your L&D initiatives, effective L&D really requires that we kind of tie it back to a business objective and make it always on, just in time, collaborative, and of course scalable, like we said there in the introduction. Again, here at AvePoint, one of the things where we've seen really great success is in developing a global framework that kind of blends the instructor-led mentoring with on-demand, always-on content and gamified goal setting that we've leveraged to increase ROI and drive organizational change here on our side. And we are validating the skill development throughout the process and being very specific about, again, the business result that's getting measured as a result of our L&D engagements. So I think with that, again, if there's a grand conclusion on the slide here, it is to think, I think, very carefully about what you are trying to do with your L&D. Be very intentional with the metric that you are trying to address, and then build something that's much more intentional into the learning engagement that you are building out on behalf of your organization. With that, Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Fantastic. No, thanks, Victor. That's great. So again, thank you everybody for joining today. So myself and Victor, we're from AvePoint, and specifically from the MaivenPoint, our edtech solution vertical of AvePoint Inc. So if you want to find out more, just hit us up on the website, MaivenPoint.com, or reach out to us anytime after this event. And thank you very much for your attendance today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you found this demo and this chat insightful. We can also do a personalized demonstration if you require additional information. We also have a number of ebooks and articles available on the website as well. So check us out. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. And with that, I think it's time to open it up to some questions.